lawyer. And next for this is Christophe. Christophe, hereinafter referred to as the Watchman. Christophe is based in Basel in Switzerland. Studied law and history at the University of Basel and was assistant international law at that university. Most relevant to today's discussion, he's been since 1990 the head of the legal department of the MCH Group, which is the leading Swiss company that operates exhibitions and trades in Basel, Zurich, and Lausanne. These include Basel World, which is the annual trade fair for the watch and jewellery show, hence the Watchman. He's on that, in that capacity, secretary of the panel of an arbitration unit which has been set up to deal with IP infringement cases, and since 1985 has handled over 800 complaints in that capacity. Second nearest to me is Christian, who's at Philip Morris as Manager of Regulatory Affairs and Brand Integrity, and he's developing and implementing strategies to address illicit trade at Philip Morris. Before joining there, Christian had extensive experience as a negotiator of international agreements for the Clinton Foundation, and prior to that he provided capacity building support and operational and technical advice in different roles at the UN. So no stranger to speaking in audiences like this. Christian has a degree in political science from Pisa and a master's in international affairs from the Institute of International Political Studies in Milan. And last but not least, Olivier, who I guess will have to be the postman, in the sense that Olivier is head of customs and international trade at La Poste Group, in charge of the worldwide group activities. His main tasks are to deal with customs, trade, and international authorities to help them better understand the post industry and negotiate improvements for the business. As Vice Chair of the Customs Group of the UPU and of the Contact Committee between UPU and WCO, he's very much a go-between for industry and the customs world. He negotiates with the DHS and CBB and the EU Commission and Chinese Trade Ministry on all aspects of postal trade internationally. Challenging role, I'm sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your diligence in attending this penultimate session of what I hope has been a very enjoyable and successful Congress. But I'd like you to take away from this session, I hope, some real practical takeaways of what we might be able to hear from the panelists today. The backdrop to this session, which is, as I say, the securing the supply chain, is to look at the role of intermediaries in the supply and distribution of counterfeit goods. What we mean by intermediaries are, in some senses, represented quite proportionately by the panel members. So we have landlord issues, vessel and shipment issues, exhibitors, exhibiting counterfeit goods potentially, and of course the Postal Service and free trade zones, represented by different panelists here. How do those intermediaries stand up when it comes to their responsibility for handling counterfeit goods? Now, recently Baker & McKenzie, my firm, was asked by BASCAP to undertake a study as to the legal ramifications of this topic by looking at this question in over 50 countries worldwide. And I can only sort of tantalize you with the report because it's not yet ready for publication. But we do have a preliminary report which was presented to the BASCAP Steering Committee recently and will be the subject of further discussion in the meeting tomorrow. And that report looked at this very question of the responsibility stroke liability, potentially, for intermediaries in the supply chain. And you may be surprised to hear that there is far more potential for legal responsibility of those players than you might think. The panelists here are going to talk through some of those topics and how that plays out in reality in their lives and their jobs But what I wanted to say was that this topic is going to be, I think, increasingly important, both at this Congress and as a topic for the trade to take increasingly seriously. The reason I say that is because the tentative findings of this report show that whether by virtue of what we call contributory liability, secondary liability, or joint liability, or simply some sort of duty of care that's established in some part of the supply chain, there is a risk of a growing responsibility being pushed onto intermediaries so that the players in this theatre of counterfeiting are not just the brand owners and the counterfeiters, but a series of players in the middle. And what they should do to help reduce counterfeiting is the question. But the way we'd like to phrase the question today is not just to sort of ponder about the legal ramifications, apart from the fact that not many of you may well be lawyers and get bored by such topics. The reality is that that backdrop of a legal framework, which is there in some shape or form, gives rise, we think, as a panel, to some sort of governance issue. What responsibility, by way of good governance, do these intermediaries play in the supply chain? And more than that, does it make good business sense for intermediaries such as shippers to actually take responsibility and distinguish themselves as ethical suppliers in the marketplace by taking this issue seriously? So whilst as a lawyer I'd be very fascinated to pursue a legal sort of course today, I'm going to withhold my inclination to do that and ask these guys to focus on what's happening on the ground with respect to various of these intermediaries in their lives. So I'm going to give the floor first of all to Darcy, who is the boatman, to kick off the discussion. Thank you.
Hello, Darcy Quinn from CropLife International,